There is a moment in many people's lives that feels like a personal failure, even though it isn't. It often shows up quietly, without drama or shouting, and because it's quiet, it's easy to misunderstand. This moment happens when you decide to step back from someone who no longer treats you with care or respect. Not to punish them, not to get a reaction, not to prove a point. You simply choose distance, calmly and cleanly, because staying connected is costing you your peace. At first, this choice can feel like weakness. It can feel like loss. Your body reacts before your mind does. There may be tightness in the chest, restlessness, difficulty sleeping, or a sense of emptiness that makes you question whether you did the right thing. From a health and emotional well-being perspective, this reaction is completely normal. Human attachment is wired deeply into the nervous system. When we remove a familiar emotional connection, the body interprets it as a threat, even if the connection was unhealthy. What most people are never taught is that this moment is not the moment you lose power or value. It is often the moment you begin to restore balance inside yourself. When you stop explaining, stop chasing, and stop emotionally overfunctioning for someone who is no longer meeting you halfway, your nervous system begins a slow recalibration. It doesn't feel good at first, but it is the beginning of regulation, not collapse. Many people believe that closure comes from talking everything through, from one last deep conversation, or from making sure the other person truly understands how much they hurt you. This belief is understandable. We are taught that communication fixes everything. In healthy relationships, open communication is essential. But when respect has already eroded, repeated explanations can actually keep emotional wounds open. From a psychological health standpoint, constant explaining often keeps the stress response activated. Your mind stays on high alert, scanning for validation, reassurance, or a sign that your pain has been acknowledged. This keeps cortisol levels elevated and prevents emotional recovery. Silence, when chosen intentionally and without hostility, allows the nervous system to settle. It creates space for the body to move out of survival mode and back towards stability. One of the most misunderstood ideas is that regret or realization in another person comes from emotional pressure, guilt, or dramatic confrontation. In reality, human behavior research shows that insight is more likely to occur during periods of quiet reflection than during emotional overload. When someone no longer has constant access to your emotional energy, they are no longer buffered from the consequences of their choices. This is not punishment, it is a natural boundary. When you remain constantly available, even after being hurt, your presence acts like emotional cushioning. It softens impact, it reduces discomfort. From a health perspective, this may feel compassionate, but it often comes at the cost of your own well-being. Over time, this can lead to emotional exhaustion, anxiety, lowered self-esteem, and a pattern of self-neglect. Removing yourself from that dynamic is a form of emotional first aid. Silence in this context is not avoidance. It is not suppression. It is a pause that allows the mind and body to process reality without interference. When there is no ongoing conversation, no reassurance, and no emotional negotiation, both people are forced to face their internal state. This is where awareness begins. Awareness is the foundation of change. Whether we are talking about mental health, emotional habits, or relationship patterns, it's important to understand that when you step away calmly, the initial response on the other side may not look like regret at all. Often there is relief from tension, relief from responsibility, relief from having to engage emotionally. This phase can be confusing and painful to witness if you are expecting immediate acknowledgement. But relief is not resolution. In psychological terms, it is a short-term stress response, similar to how the body goes numb after an injury. As time passes and the nervous system settles, the absence becomes more noticeable. The brain begins to compare before and after. This comparison process is critical. Regret, reflection, and insight only occur when the mind can clearly feel contrast. Without contrast, there is no data for the brain to work with. When access is removed, the contrast becomes unavoidable. For your own health, the most important shift happens internally. You stop monitoring someone else's reactions and start paying attention to your own state. Are you sleeping better or worse? Is your appetite changing? Do you feel calmer or more agitated? These signals matter. They tell you whether a connection was nourishing or draining. Walking away from emotional strain is not weakness. It is a protective response that supports long-term mental and physical health. This process also reduces rumination over time. When you are no longer explaining yourself, you are no longer rehearsing the same emotional story over and over. The brain gradually learns that it does not need to stay alert for the next message or reaction. This creates room for focus, clarity, and recovery. In many cases, people report improved concentration, steadier moods, and a renewed sense of self once they stop engaging in emotionally unbalanced dynamics. The key is that this distance is chosen without anger. Anger keeps the stress response alive. Calm detachment allows it to settle. When you walk away without hostility, you are not escalating conflict. You are de-escalating your own internal chaos. That alone is a powerful act of self-care. This moment is not about trying to make someone miss you. It is about stopping the slow erosion of your own emotional health. When you no longer need constant validation, your body begins to relax, your mind begins to clear. You start acting in alignment with your values instead of reacting to someone else's behavior. In the next part, we will explore what happens psychologically when access disappears without drama, why uncertainty affects the human mind so deeply, and how this process unfolds over time in a way that is often invisible at first. When contact ends without conflict, without long explanations, and without emotional back and forth, something subtle but important happens in the human mind. The brain is designed to seek patterns, feedback, and resolution. When those elements suddenly disappear, the mind enters a state of uncertainty. From a psychological and emotional health perspective, uncertainty is far more uncomfortable than clear pain. Pain can be explained, uncertainty cannot. At first, the mind protects itself. It builds a logical story to reduce discomfort. Thoughts like, this was for the best, or things were already fading, act as temporary stabilizers. This is not dishonesty. It is the brain doing its job, trying to maintain emotional equilibrium. As long as there is even minimal access, a reply here, a check-in there, that story remains stable. The nervous system stays calm enough to avoid deeper reflection. When access is fully removed, that stabilizing story begins to weaken. There are no new signals to confirm it, no emotional data, no reassurance. This is when rumination begins. Rumination is not nostalgia. It is the brain searching for missing information. It replays moments not to feel pain, but to understand what changed and why. This process can take weeks or even months because it depends on timing, stress levels, and emotional readiness. From a health standpoint, this is also where identity disruption occurs. We are not only attached to people, we are attached to roles. Being someone's partner, emotional anchor, or point of familiarity becomes part of how a person regulates their own emotions. When that role disappears without warning or explanation, the nervous system has to reorganize. That reorganization is uncomfortable. Discomfort is often the beginning of insight. What makes calm absence so powerful is that it removes external focus. There is no argument to replay, no final speech to analyze, no anger to blame. Anger, while painful, gives the mind something solid to hold on to. It creates a clear villain and a clear story. Silence offers no such structure. The mind is left alone with its own questions. This internal questioning is where deeper awareness forms. Many people assume that if someone does not react immediately, nothing is happening. In reality, delayed emotional processing is common and healthy. The brain often needs time away from stimulation to integrate experience. This is why insight so often arrives late at night, during quiet moments, or long after an event has passed. Without ongoing contact, the emotional system is finally allowed to process the loss fully. Explaining yourself at the end may feel mature, but it often prevents this internal process. Explanations give the mind closure. Closure reduces uncertainty. Reduced uncertainty reduces reflection. From a psychological perspective, this can short-circuit growth on both sides. The person who leaves keeps reliving the story, while the person who is left with an explanation can mentally file the experience away and move on without deeper examination. Silence, on the other hand, leaves the story unfinished. Unfinished narratives stay active in the brain. They resurface during stress, during comparison, and during moments of emotional vulnerability. This is not about manipulation, it is about how human cognition naturally works. The mind pays more attention to what it cannot fully resolve. Another important effect is the shift in perceived value. When someone remains endlessly available, availability is taken for granted. From a health and behavioral standpoint, the brain assigns less significance to what feels unlimited. When access ends without hostility, it signals a boundary. Boundaries communicate self-respect more clearly than words. This can trigger reassessment, not because of loss alone, but because of changed perception. Over time, comparison begins. The emotional system compares the current state to the past state. Silence is compared to familiarity. Absence is compared to connection. This comparison is where regret, curiosity, or reassessment may emerge. It does not always lead to reconnection, and it should not be used as a goal. The real value of this process is that it restores balance to the dynamic and allows both individuals to face reality without emotional buffering. From your own health perspective, this phase requires patience and consistency. Breaking silence too early often resets the process. When contact resumes before emotional processing is complete, the nervous system returns to relief. Relief feels good, but it delays adaptation. This can prolong emotional distress rather than resolve it. Calm distance also protects you. It prevents repeated emotional spikes caused by mixed signals, delayed responses, or inconsistent engagement. Over time, your stress response stabilizes. You become less reactive. Your sense of self becomes less dependent on external feedback. This is not emotional shutdown, it is emotional regulation. In the next part, we will look at why regret and realization often arrive late rather than immediately, how power dynamics naturally shift when emotional dependence decreases, and what internal mistakes can undo your own healing if you are not mindful during this phase. Regret, reflection, and emotional clarity almost never arrive on schedule. This is one of the hardest truths to accept, especially for someone who has just stepped away. The human mind does not process loss in a straight line. It moves in phases. First comes relief, then distraction, then adjustment, and only later does true awareness begin to surface. This delay is not a sign that your decision had no impact. It is a sign that the nervous system is slowly recalibrating. Immediate reactions are usually driven by the ego and by short-term emotional regulation. Long-term reflection comes from identity shifts. When someone realizes that access they assumed was permanent is no longer available, it challenges an internal belief. Beliefs are not released easily. The brain resists them until reality consistently contradicts them. That contradiction only holds when distance is maintained without interruption. From a psychological health perspective, this is where power dynamics naturally rebalance. Power in emotional relationships is not about control or dominance. It is about dependency. The person who is less dependent on the outcome is more emotionally regulated. When you stop seeking reassurance, explanations, or validation, you reduce dependency. This stabilizes your nervous system and shifts your internal posture from reactive to grounded. As this happens, attention turns inward. You stop scanning for messages. You stop interpreting silence. You stop waiting for signs. This internal shift is crucial for recovery. Chronic anticipation keeps the stress response active. Letting go of outcome monitoring allows the body to return to baseline. Many people notice improved sleep, steadier appetite, and reduced anxiety once they truly disengage from emotional surveillance. One of the most common mistakes during this phase is re-entering too soon. Curiosity, nostalgia, or doubt can creep in quietly. A simple check-in can feel harmless, even caring. But from a health standpoint, it often resets the nervous system back to uncertainty and relief cycles. Relief feels calming in the moment, but it prevents adaptation. The brain learns that discomfort will be interrupted, so it never completes the processing loop. Another subtle mistake is remaining emotionally available without physical presence. Long conversations, emotional support, or reassurance keep the attachment system active. This creates confusion for both sides. The body experiences connection, while the mind knows separation is supposed to be happening. This contradiction increases stress rather than reducing it. True boundaries require consistency, not punishment. If contact resumes later, what matters is not the fact that it happens, but the quality of it. Healthier reconnection is marked by accountability, clarity, and sustained effort over time. Comfort seeking, nostalgia, or curiosity alone do not indicate real change. Responding too quickly or too warmly before alignment is restored can undermine your own self respect and emotional safety. The deeper truth is that this process is not about causing regret in someone else, it is about preventing self abandonment. When you stay in situations that erode your boundaries, your body keeps score. Tension accumulates, resentment builds, energy drains. Walking away calmly is often the first act of real self-protection. From a health awareness perspective, emotional self-respect is preventative care. It reduces long-term stress, protects mental health, and supports healthier future relationships. When you no longer need to be chosen to feel worthy, your emotional system becomes more resilient. You respond instead of react. You choose instead of chase. What happens on the other side is out of your control, and that is where your freedom lives. If reflection leads to genuine change, you meet it from stability, not desperation. If it does not, you move forward without betraying yourself. Either outcome supports growth. Silence, when chosen with clarity and calm, is not absence of care. It is presence of self. It allows truth to surface without force. It allows the nervous system to settle. It allows identity to realign. The real transformation is not external, it is internal. The moment you stop trying to prove your value is the moment your health, clarity, and self-respect begin to return. When you no longer need an outcome to validate you, you become emotionally stronger, more grounded, and more whole. That is not loss, that is recovery.